Okay, so we are continuing with solving equations. And remember, when we are solving, we want to undo the exponent or the whatever operation it is by doing the inverse. So if it is an exponent, the reverse or inverse of an exponent is a root, right? So depending on the type of exponent, the inverse root will undo the operation. So if it was a square, the inverse would be a square root, right? So if it is a power 3, the inverse is root 3. You may see in the guide something like this. So they say, well, the inverse of 3 is 1 over 3, right? Those are inverse operations. So if you multiplied 3 by 1/3, you would get 1, right? You'd get 3 over 3. We get 3 over 3, which equals 1. So if we have a number and we multiply by its reciprocal, we will get 1, right? So if I take 3 times 1/3, I will get x to the 1. But whatever I do to the left side, I have to do to the right side. Well, what does 27 to the 1/3 mean? A fraction or rational exponent indicates a root. Okay, so I'll just write this here. Rational exponents or fractions equals a root. So the number on the bottom is what kind of root it is, and the number on the top is the exponent. So if I am doing 27 to the power 1 over 3, it's telling me it's a root. So 27 goes inside. The number on the bottom tells me the type of root, so it's a third root, and it's to the power 1. Okay, so how do we do a third root on our calculator? So everybody should have some sort of device in front of them. So your root button is generally close to your power button. Okay, I'm just going to put on a new screen here. So on a calculator, my exponent button looks like this. So this is a power. It could also look like this, right? This is also a power or an exponent. And you might specifically have a square root, right? That's a square root button. So that's a square root. These two above are both powers. So next to or above my power button is a key that looks like this. Right? So that is my root button. So that tells me how I could do any kind of root. Okay? If you have the other type of button for your power, you should have something nearby that tells you what kind. So if I'm doing the third root of 27, I'm going to do 3. Then I'm going to press this root button. So I'm telling it to do the third root, and then I'm going to press 27. So generally that's the order that you type it in. If you have an older calculator, you might have to do 27 as the base, the root button, and then tell it what type of root. So you might have to do it in the reverse. So you just have to see what kind of calculator you have. So your old one might say, put in the base, then I want to do a root, and then I'm going to tell it what kind of root. So I want the third root, right? So you just have to try it with your calculator. So if I'm doing the third root of 27, I should get an answer of 3. And why is that? Well, that's because 27 is 3 times 3 times 3. And a third root means I need 3 numbers to equal one whole number. So that's why the third root of 27 is 3. So most of these you could do in your head if you understand what the root is asking. Okay, so if I want the fourth root, x to the 4 is 16, and I want to figure out what x is, I can multiply the reciprocal of 4, so 1/4. I'm going to do the same to the other side. So 4 times 1/4 is 1, so that leaves me with x. And then 1/4 Well, the number on the bottom is the kind of root, so 4. And then the top number is the exponent. Okay, so I want the fourth root of 16, and that will be a value of 2. Okay, and why is it 2? Well, because it's the fourth root, and 16 is 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 2's. So since it's the fourth root, that equals one whole number of 2. Okay, so those are the roots that you're going to find. All right. That's not what I wanted. Sorry, just got to move this up a bit. So I want this one next. Okay, so write each expression in radical form and then evaluate. It says without a calculator, but obviously you can use your calculator. But you don't really need to. So 243 to the 1 over 5. So the fraction exponent indicates it's a root. The 243 goes inside the root. The 5 is the kind of root, right? So it's fifth root. And then the 1 is the exponent. So we have one of them. So you want the fifth root of 243. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't. Maybe you could do it in your head, maybe you can't. So you could just type it into the calculator, and you will see that it equals 3, and 3 to the power 1 is 3. Okay, and the fifth root of 243 is 3, because 243 is 5 3's, right? 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, b is a little different, because we have, it's not 1 over, so it's 9 to the 3 over 2. Okay, so it's a fraction exponent, which means it's a root. The 9 goes inside the root. The number on the bottom is the root, so it's a square root. The number on the top is the exponent. So after we square root, we're going to take the answer and power 3. So the square root of 9 is 3. That's easy. And then power 3 is 27, right? 3 times 3 times 3. Or you could do it, I'm just going to write this out again. So we could do the power first and the root second if you want. So we could say 9 to the power 3 and then square root. I like to do the root first because I can generally do it in my head because I am working with a smaller number. So if I square root 9, I get 3. I can do that in my head, and then I know 3 to the power 3 is 27. If I do the power first, I'm going to get a big number. So 9 to the power 3 is 729. And then I take the square root of that. Well, maybe I don't know the square root of that in my head, right? Mental math. Maybe I don't have a calculator. So the square root of 29 is 27. Right? So I still end up with the same result, but I think it's easier to do the root first so that you're working with a smaller value. And that means if you don't have a calculator handy, you could always do it in your head. Okay? So either way is fine, but I would suggest you do the root before the exponent. Okay, so 8 to the 5 over 3. So the fraction means it's a root. 8 goes inside. 3 is the kind of root. And then after that, we're going to power 5. So the third root of 8 is 2. And then we're going to do 2 to the power 5 is 32. Okay, so they're not that hard to do, especially if you have a calculator. Okay, some things to be careful of is E. So we have a decimal. Let's see, 0.0625 to the quarter. Not that hard if you just use your calculator, right? I could just put that number in there. I'm taking the fourth root. So the fourth root of 0.0625 do it as a decimal, that's 0.5. Okay. You will notice that the instructions say write each expression as radical form and then evaluate without a calculator. So if I was evaluating this without a calculator, I would need to turn that decimal into a fraction. So that I have some whole numbers. Because it's very hard to take the fourth root of decimal 0.625 if you didn't have a calculator. If we didn't have a calculator, we could change this to a fraction. Well, this is, if you think of decimal places, this is the tenths, the hundredths, the thousandths, the 10,000ths. So I need another 0. So if I were changing that to a fraction, it would be 625 over 10,000 because I have tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. And then I could do that because the fourth root of 625, right? I could do that. Well, that's 5. And the fourth root of 10,000 is 10. So that's 1/2, which is the same as 0.5. So that's how you would do it if it was a decimal and you didn't have a calculator. You would have to change it to a fraction and then do the fourth root of the top number and the fourth root of the bottom number. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that. You will, of course, have a calculator, so it's not that difficult, but that's how you would do it if you didn't. Be careful of signs and brackets. So this one says negative 32 over 3/5. So you will notice that there's brackets around the negative 32. So that means that when you put it in root form, the negative is also inside the root because there's brackets around it. If there were no brackets, the negative would be outside the roots. And then it's the fifth root and to the power 3. Well, I can fifth root a negative number because I have an odd number, right? 5. So the fifth root of negative 32 is negative 2. So make sure that's in brackets. And then to the power 3 is negative 8. So the reason I can fifth root a negative number is because negative 32 would be 5 negative 2's. Right? So that would give me negative 32. I couldn't even root a negative number because I can't have an even number of negative values and get a negative answer, right? It would be positive. So you can odd root negative values, but you can't even root negative values. Okay, and just make sure with brackets, if it's included, put it inside the square root. And if it's no brackets, put the negative outside the square root. So for example, if I had negative, let's say 16 to the 1/4, or if I had brackets around it, they mean different things. So since there's no brackets, it would be negative outside, 16 on the inside. Well, I can do that because I can do the fourth root of 16 and get negative 2. This one has brackets, and that means the negative 16 is inside the bracket, and it wants me to do the fourth root. Well, that's not possible, right? Because I can't fourth root a negative number. I would have a positive result. Okay, so just be careful whether there's brackets or no brackets. Okay, so these are all from the guide, right, in the practice questions. So this one says solve for x and assume x is positive. And how do you know your answer is correct? So A says x to the 1/2 equals 7. So these ones you're not going to be able to complete in your head because you're going to get some of them will be decimal answers. Okay, so we could leave it as an exact value. So if I want to find x, I would have to do the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2. Okay? So I have to do the same on the other side. So 1/2 times 2 is 1. And then I could just square the 7. Okay? How do I know if I'm right? Well, I can check it. I can say 49 is my answer to the 1/2. 1/2 means the square root of 49 to the power 1, and I know the square root of 49 is 7, so my answer is correct. Okay? So you can always put your answer back into the original question to find the results and see if you're right. So question 2 says x squared equals 9. So if I want to solve for x, I would need to do the reciprocal of 2, which is 1/2, and do the same on the other side. So 2 times 1/2 is 1. And then 9 to the 1/2, well, I have a fraction exponent, so it's a root. 9 goes inside. The number on the bottom is 2, so it's a square root to the power 1, so square root of 9 is 3. Okay, so whatever exponent you have, you want to do the reciprocal. So I'm just going to skip over to 3e. So you can do the ones that I don't do. So it's x to the power 3 equals 27 over 64. So if I want to solve for x, I'm going to do the reciprocal of 3, which is 1/3, and do the same to the other side. So 3 times 1/3 is 1. And then we have a fraction, so it's a root. It's a third root to the power 1. So you can root these numbers individually. So if I have the third root of 27 over 64, that's the same as saying the third root of 27 and the third root of 64. So I can do them as separate values. So the third root of 27 is 3, and the third root of 64 is 4. Okay, and then to the power 1 is to the power 1. So no different than just doing a regular whole number. So we've done that. We don't need to do that one. So there will be some applications where they might give you a formula with a fraction in it. So this one says you have a brain mass with the letter B and a body mass, which is the letter M. And it gives you a formula. So brain mass is 0.011 times the body mass to the power 2 over 3. Okay, so I'll write out the formula. So the first question says determine the brain mass, which is B, and it gives you a body mass of 512 kilograms. Okay, note that the formula is given in kilograms, so I don't have to convert the mass because it's already in the proper unit. So I'm just going to put in the mass into the equation and calculate it. So could you calculate 512 to the power 2 over 3? You could. You could just type it in your calculator. Just keep in mind, and I'm going to write it as a root. But keep in mind, if you are typing it into the calculator and you are using an exponent button, make sure you put brackets around the 2 over 3, or you'll get the wrong answer, okay? Because the calculator will only do what you tell it to do. And if you put in 512 to the power 2 over 3 and you don't put brackets around that 2 over 3, what the calculator will do is 512 to the power 2, so it will square it, and then it will take the entire answer and divide by 3, and that's not the same thing. Okay, so if you are going to type it in as it's written, make sure that you put the exponent in brackets so that it does 512 to the power 2 over 3. and doesn't do that separately. So that's just a hint there. Or you could do the root separately. So I could do the third root of 512, which is 8, and then square that, which is 64, and then get my answer. So 64 times 0.011 is 0.704 kilograms. So you can evaluate it as a root, or you could just type in 512 to the power 2 over 3, just keeping in mind that that 2 over 3 needs to be in brackets. Okay, B says, determine the brain mass of a 420 gram chinchilla. Does it say chinchilla? Yep. So same formula. But you will notice that, let me erase this, that the mass is given in grams, but my formula is in kilograms. So we need to convert the 420 grams to kilograms. So there are 1,000 grams in 1 kilogram. So this would equal 0.420 kilograms. Okay, so you have to make sure that you change that over, and then we can put that into the formula. Okay, so since it's a decimal, I'm just going to type in decimal 420 to the power, and then I'm going to put it in brackets, 2 divided by 3. And I'm going to get a decimal answer, and then I'm going to multiply that by 0.011. Okay, so that one I decided to just use it as an exponent, making sure that I put the exponent in brackets. And then C asks, determine the brain mass of a cat. Oh, the brain mass of a cat is about 0.025 kilograms. Determine its body mass. Okay, so let's write out the formula. And they are giving us B. B is brain mass. So they're giving us the value of B. Yep. And it's in kilograms, so we don't have to convert it. So we have to solve for M this time. Okay, so we need to isolate the M and get it by itself. The decimal 0.011 is multiplied by the M, so if we want to eliminate that, we need to do the inverse, which is division. So we're going to divide by 0.011 to eliminate that, and we have to do the same on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to take that 0.25 divided by 0.011, and I get 2.2727. So I'm going to keep 4 decimals just to make sure that I'm accurate. And then I want to inverse 2/3, right? Because I want to solve for M. So I'm going to do the reciprocal of 2/3, because 2/3 times 3 over 2 is 1. And then I have to do the same on this side. Okay, so 2/3 times 3 over 2 is 1, so that just leaves me with M. And then I have a fraction exponent, so it's going to be a root. The number on the bottom is 2, so it's going to be a square root, and then I'm going to go to the power 3. And we get an answer of 3.43 kilograms. Okay, so we want to undo 2/3 by doing the reciprocal. And then you can either do the square root of 2.2727 and then power 3, or you could do 2.2727 to the power 3 over 2, just making sure that you put the 3 over 2 in brackets so that it And you can try it both ways just to make sure that you get the same result. So I'm going to try the other way just to make sure that I get the same answer. And I do. I still get 3.43, right? So either method is fine as long as you make sure you put brackets around that exponent. Okay, are there any questions on that? Okay, so for those of you who came a little late, joined a little late, or maybe I'm going to pull it up on the screen here. Just a sec. Okay, so I put the same message on both course websites. So I put a note here on midterms. So last day for work submission is November 9th. The MAP students would need to complete units 1 to 6. And anything that is not completed will be put a temporary 0. It's not a permanent 0, but it's put in temporarily for midterms so that we have on-track marking. So anything that is not completed up to the end of Unit 6 will receive a 0. So when I'm looking at my quizzes here, that means I have to get Unit 1 task, Unit 2 task, Unit 3, 4 task, and Unit 5, 6 task for this course, and the strand test. Okay, so you guys need to get up to here, the strand test. So that is for the MAP students. Let's look at the MCT. So the MCT course, you will need to complete units 1 to 7. And so looking at your evaluations, you would have task 1, 2, 3, strand test 1, and then task 4, 5, and 6, 7. Okay? And that's how far you need to get. So you need to get up to here. All right? So make sure that you are planning carefully between now and November 9th. Right? You don't want to be behind, especially when we're heading into our second or third rotation. You want to make sure that you're on track. I still have not heard about the cohorts for the next rotation. I did put in a request to have the 2 courses in different cohorts, but I haven't heard back yet. So once I find out, I will let you know. You can always check your cohort, I think, on your, I don't know where it appears for you guys. It appears on my attendance when I do my attendance. Okay, is there any questions on midterms?